Panel: Reading the Tea Leaves, The Future of Accessibility. Alley Camp. Gold sponsors ANZ, Intopia and Telstra. Silver sponsors Canva and Coles. Supporters Rumour, the design recruiter.
So I'm going to just open this up a little bit. I'm going to ignore Joe for a second because Joe kicked us off this morning. So everyone in this room should already know who Joe is. But Tash, can you introduce yourselves to the room and give a little bit of your background and sort of what brings you to where you are today?
Sure, so nice to meet you all. I'm Natasha, or Tash, and I'm from Sign, as Sarah just mentioned. But really, where I started in accessibility was when I was a primary school music teacher. And when I started as a primary school music teacher, I found there was a real need in order to support children who weren't getting access to music, whether that be because they were from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or they didn't have the resources out at regional schools. And from there, I was really proud to have a really diverse range of students who I was able to teach, getting up to 120 across the Central Coast, learning piano, learning theory of music, learning singing. And then from there, when I started to get into design, I took some of those same principles in order to create diversity in the products and services we create.
Thank you very much, Tash. And Ben, yourself, why don't you give a little bit of background for everyone in the room so they get to know a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, so Ben Moxey. As Stewart said, I work at Guide Dogs New South Wales ACT. How did I find my way here? Basically, I was born with very low vision and used strong magnification and all that sort of stuff, very strong in the end, and lost it entirely about the age of 20 due to detached retinas. So very quickly I had to embrace assistive technology. It was kind of that overnight total blindness. So screen readers, all that sort of thing, so I could maintain my own independence and lifestyle, and quickly developed into a bit of a passion when I realised with just the opportunities that opened up and the ability to access information independently again and all that sort of stuff. So nevertheless, it took me about 10 years to find my way into the field. Worked a couple of menial jobs, and to be honest, it was because I didn't think I was sort of capable of much more at that time. But yeah, that's how I found my way here, Stuart. It's just passion obviously just stemmed from my lived experience.
Oh, thank you, Ben. And Joe, I should probably get you to introduce yourself again because I know we are recording this. So for those who may be watching this later, maybe a brief reintroduction of yourself as well.
Sure. So I'm co-founder of Global Accessibility Awareness Day and chair of the GAD Foundation. I'm also co-host of Accessibility and Gen AI, a podcast on that topic. And I am the chief vibe coder in my household.
So we have a very diverse panel here with us today. And as Sarah had introduced us, we're going to start looking at the tea leaves of the future, or our little globe or orb to sort of see, well, what is the world going to look like moving forward? And what I love is we've got a panel here of individuals who have a little bit of a human-centered design background to them, a little bit of lived experience and tech background, and then a techie sort of more background to them. And it gives us hopefully a really good maybe mix of perspectives that we're looking at. So I'm just going to start off with, let's go with the big question, which is like, what is our industry going to look like in 5 to 10 years? Now, Joe, I might start with you because I think we've heard from you, but I think you're a good starting point because I think there's some nice counterpoints we'll have off of you. So, Joe, where do you think this industry is going to look like in 5 to 10 years?
Gosh, when you go 10 years out, it's like so far out. I mean, what does next week look like? We're sitting here at a conference, and I'm already like 2 days behind on Cursor releasing their own model, and then right behind them, Windsurf releases their own model. There's so much innovation that 5-10 years is overwhelming. But I think that, it's one of these weird things because you think about people's jobs and you don't want people to lose their jobs, but at the same time, if we can make massive improvements in accessibility, that's what we all want, right? Yeah. But it's really scary, and already I have so many friends, at least in America, a lot of job loss there in the accessibility space. So let's just talk about a few details of what could change, if that's all right. Yeah. So One of the big things I think is it's all going to be AI coding, like I spoke about this morning. The computer use is the big one. If every assistive technology, if you could put that in the hands of an AI, then we'll be able to do all kind of testing, automated testing, and get really good results, which will improve accessibility considerably. So how does that impact our jobs? And you and I have actually spoken about this a little bit. There are so many issues to tackle in the industry. We're sitting here saying, how accessible is a website? And you get it to work. So people that are great at screen readers will then be able to access X percentage of sites because they actually are accessible. But what about the people that don't know how to use screen readers that well, or don't know how to use technology that well? That's a whole older people that just don't even want to begin with this. That will allow you to sort of tackle the industry, to tackle those kind of more maybe edge case now could become mainstream. That's what I'm hoping for, but what will happen, I have no idea.
So you're thinking maybe a little bit more Star Trek world look and feel to it, where we're just talking to the computer, it just makes things happen for us, holodeck style?
Well, you asked specifically about the industry, but if you want to say what the day-to-day life is, it's going to be robot. When you attach a robot to an LLM, that changes everything, and I don't know what job is safe in that world. And to my shock, after landing here, I saw one commercial that looked like it was a joke of a robot that's going to cost $500 a month, and it's going to do your laundry for you and things like that. And it looked like it was a human in a robot costume, but you literally could buy the robot. And then I saw a bunch of really serious people that started to talk about how the world is going to change. So I still have to look into it, but it sounds like it might be there, like to some degree, right?
So you're highlighting a highly disruptive space, and as we know, it's hard. Like, we are really in a point of disruption, I think, because of technology and how it's going to impact with society. And there's some huge promises to it. I think we'll get to some of the uncertainty negatives in a second. But Ben, I want to throw to you because I'm curious. There's a lot of discussion around how this might support people with disabilities and how this could actually be a huge breakthrough from all the challenges we've seen to date around some of the stats, say, Joe was showing earlier from the WebAIM survey, where it's like 98% down to 96% or something like that of websites are inaccessible, and it's still getting a little bit better, but it's fractional, if anything else. How do you view this from your perspective as an individual and the potential benefits or differences of what this world's going to look like for you and the industry that you're working in as well?
Look, as an individual and a proud member of the blind and low vision community, and a lot of people that I deal with through work, it's really interesting because there's a lot of excitement. So it's not that apprehension so much of job security, etc. There's just so much excitement, I will say, for Stewart, because like the simple example of the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. So Meta is a company that's lost a lot of people's trust over the years, just in every community, after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And in the blind and low vision community, there were a lot of people talking on podcasts and that sort of thing, saying they won't use their services anymore. All of a sudden, the Meta glasses hit the scene, a low-cost pair of glasses that have AI built in that's doing quite helpful visual recognition. The blind and low vision community have absolutely embraced them. So I think we're going to see that continue. People are open to the opportunities it's bringing and breaking down some of those barriers. Joe mentioned something really important. Those people that will always struggle to use a screen reader. Like, you picture someone who loses their vision entirely, say in their mid-60s, and they might not have been a real comprehensive computer user before that. All of a sudden, they've got to rely on it to access information. And frankly, we can't avoid using computers nowadays anyway. It's understandable that some of those people never quite get their head around looking at a complex website. Well, looking, bad way to put it. They've got a complex website in front of them. They're supposed to drive it with 1 million keyboard commands. It's understandable that many people don't ever feel comfortable with it. So this is where this AI may actually support. When Agenic AI comes in, did I say that right, Jeff?
Yes, yeah.
And it's basically the AI that has the ability to go and do multiple steps for you. So you could go to a travel website, for example, I could book my flight home, by just speaking to the computer and it goes and does everything for me, all those different steps. Like, imagine that breakthrough for those people that just frankly find the screen reader situation overwhelming, despite how accessible the product is.
No, Ben, it's fascinating because I mean, we were hearing a bit about that from Anthony Vasquez this morning around self-driving cars and how that can open up a lot more freedom and opportunities for everyone as well, which is lots of promise there, which is amazing. And I think, Tash, I'll come to you because, I mean, there's this interesting space you're now in because you're not necessarily in that pure play technology space, which does sound like there's some heavy disruption from that, but you're in that sort of human-centered design interface space. Where do you see the industry going with this change that we're seeing from technological advancements from AI and so forth?
So I think there's probably two interesting things to consider. I think one is AI always going to be democratized? Like, we know how much OpenAI is losing year on year because of the cost that it takes to run these massive, massive models. I think they're predicting an 8 billion loss this year, and it was 5 billion last year. So does that mean that AI is always going to continue to be accessible? What if it doesn't? What's the impact of that for people who can't access it, who might be in situations like financial hardship? You touched on Ray-Bans. It's quite a reasonable price point, $500 a month to have a robot that can do your cleaning, someone that you can speak to book your travel. Well, all of these things require a price point. And so how are we thinking about that inclusiveness and access to some of these technologies? And I think the second thing is how are we thinking about those that are highly excluded in society? And so there's something called the Australian Digital Inclusion Index. If you haven't looked it up, highly encourage you to take a look. There's some fantastic data that sits behind it. But one of the things they said is that the level of digital inclusion has just gone up exponentially since COVID. And then since AI has been introduced, it's actually the first time that the highly excluded people in our society are closing the gap as to having their digital inclusion levels increased as well. But what they're finding is that people who've got intersectional vulnerability, so you might be someone who is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, living in a regional or remote community, experiencing severe financial hardship, might have a disability. When you add all of those things together, those highly excluded populations of society are getting left further and further behind. And that's what we're going to have to start doing as human-centered design, is as technologists, as strategists, as leaders, is designing for them.
Yeah, so there's definitely still their important role in the near term. Near term can be still that 5 to 10 year mark, I think, because Joe, you touched on earlier, there's technology is changing. There's some amazing things we can do. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's going to create substantially much more information, like AI systems, building AI solutions and building more output. I mean, we can see that happening already. And you mentioned, what was it, 8 billion lines of
I
code?
just estimated 10 billion a day.
Roughly 10 billion lines of code by computers being created versus 3 billion by humans. I mean, we now have this situation where we already are struggling as an accessibility inclusion profession to keep up with the amount of content that's out there today to maintain that. So does this actually maybe create an opportunity still for us as a community, considering that computers are going to be generating $10 billion more output versus 3 billion? So what's that factor of 3 times more output potentially, and maybe exponentially growing? Where do you think and I'm going to go back to you, Joe, like, where do you think some of maybe the tripping hazards are at the moment? So we know that we hear so much about the rose-colored glasses of AI and how great it's going to be for us. But we know it's not going to be that. We know there's going to be potholes and speed bumps and so forth. What do you think some of maybe those big sort of speed bumps are going to be that we have to navigate over the coming years?
There's so many. Let's start with who's in control of it. Is this going to be something where open source is going to be able and compute? Are they going to figure out an algorithm which doesn't require the absolute insane compute that goes into this? It's so funny because it reminds me of blockchain. When Bitcoin became big, I started reading the white papers, and I was just amazed. This is an amazing technology. And then as somebody that worked at AmericanIdol.com and like really focused on scaling traffic, I was like, this is going to take over money? No way. The compute is just too ridiculous, and it's fundamental to it. It's similar with AI. What you said was actually right on the money. It is extremely expensive to do all this inference and training. And one day, is the rug going to be pulled? That's what I wonder, unless they discover a new way of doing things, and there's definitely people working on the new ways of doing things. So you've got the rug pull, you've got who's in charge, is this going to be centralized or not? And then you're right, is there going to be so much bad code written that we're going to actually have 10 times more work? Because my thesis is, if you are an organization that is selling software, and you have all of these clients, right, and software is able to be written very quickly, you know, when you're writing that software, you have to make decisions. You have to have taste, and you have to say, I am not going to develop this. Like Apple says, I'm only going to make the best phone that I can make. I'm not going to make 100 different models, right, in order to sell it. But when you have AI, it's inexpensive to do software, then every single client that sends in a feature request, well, why don't you make a custom version of the software for them? And now all of a sudden, your system that might have had 1 million lines of code will have 1 billion lines of code. And so there's going to be more work than there was before. That could be a tripwire. But then you have the security, InfoSec. That is a huge nightmare. And then you're going to have malign actors that are going to train their own models, that are going to go out there and stress test every single system. We're in a whole new world, and there's a war underneath it, right? A real war underneath it,
yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen.
You touched on something that I'd be interested to get, Ben, your insight on. So one of the things I believe is going to be a big challenge around AI is the trust and security side of things. I can see how on one side of the coin, it can be hugely enabling for some of the disability community. But on the other side of the coin, I could see a scenario where if that got corrupted or hacked, how even more detrimental that could be for some disability community. So Ben, I'm curious, what are your thoughts around that sort of trust security around AI as one of those maybe big tripping points that we have to deal with moving forward?
Look, conversations that I have with clients that we work with, I generally would recommend, and this is a pretty sensible recommendation across the board, I think that if you're going to use AI, I mentioned before that it's really commonly used in the blind and low vision community for visual interpretation. So someone might hold their iPhone camera or their Android camera over their bank statement as an extreme example, and then query the AI to tell them, well, what were my transactions on a particular date. Okay, so that's something you can do quite well, but you are sending it to the cloud. So our general advice is, if you've got tasks like that, at least at this point in time, you're far better off doing it with a trusted family member. So I generally recommend that if you've got a trusted friend or family member to look at sensitive data like a bank statement, like your passport, whatever it might be, if you need to do it remotely, perhaps use FaceTime. Call them, it's encrypted, you're speaking to someone you trust. So I definitely think those considerations, I can't see them going anywhere, or those concerns, Stewart, going anywhere anytime soon.
There was the example the other day, there was a big news article on it where all of the people who had applied for flood grants with the Northern Rivers floods, someone had put their data into AI to see whether or not they should be eligible for grants. And now there's all of this analysis to be like, well, what's going to be the implications of that? Can someone design a dark prompt that can uncover all of those people's information, their sensitive financial information, their addresses, their history? And so I think we're still in the process of figuring out what happens when we do use AI incorrectly.
Yeah.
The lethal trifecta is the term for it, where essentially, if I'm remembering correctly, you are giving trusted information to untrusted sources and allow agentic behavior to happen, right? So every single one of those companies that are coming out with browsers that are AI-based, I'm dying to play with them. I will not touch them for that reason. They're totally insecure. Doesn't matter. OpenAI, Perplexity, all of them.
So, Tash, funnily enough, Joe and I were talking about something along similar lines the other day, and we've seen every time we've had AI agents become semi-human interactive in the world, fairly quickly. They don't play nicely soon after. So we've got history of Microsoft a few years back. Grok decided to go a bit strange recently. And there was a report just this week where they did some research where they built a completely separate social media network populated by only 500 AI agents and no human interaction. And it went off down some very strange and dark paths, which did resemble a lot of human interaction we see on social media today, where bubble-based sort of news bubbles got created within this sort of network. From the human-centric side of things, like we've got all this amazing technology, and as we said, we can talk about all the positives out of that, but that sort of, those issues for the human interaction around this technology, what are some of your views maybe from that perspective? Like, what do you think, thinking about that human-centered interaction with the technology and its advances we're going through?
So I think it's interesting, like if we think about, we say 5 years into the future or 3 years or 2 days, because we're not talking, 10, 20 years into the future anymore. I'm going to be in a family unit that's just a bunch of AI versions of my family. And I'm going to be in a team that's a bunch of AI versions of my team. And then they'll escalate certain things when they need to be escalated. But we're all going to have digital versions of ourselves and just trust that they're going to be able to speak for ourselves online, right? And so I think there's something really interesting around how much control we give over agents that we're creating for ourselves as humans, but also the way that we're interacting with them. And I think there's something really interesting around, if we take personas, for example, which is a key thing in human-centered design, should we create an agent that is a living and breathing persona that represents a customer cohort that we have in our organization? We can ingest real data that's coming from our customer complaints. We can ingest things from social media. But what happens is that persona becomes quite aggravated, because how many times do people post about something positive online, right? You only go on Facebook to complain about something that's happened 90% of the time. And so I think there's this, and it comes back to what we were saying before, not everyone engages online, not everyone's engaging with these agents, and so they sort of just represent this population of society that is the average or is the assumed. And so I think there's a layer that we need to think about around how we build agents around us as to where we intervene as humans, but also what layer of bias those agents carry as well.
Yeah, and I think that the bias has been an interesting one we've seen for many years now, and every early incarnation of AI, and we're seeing even through to today, from like the recruitment platforms through to those platforms that they were using in the judicial system in the United States for trying to help with sentencing. Like we've seen every single one of them have had some very distinct biases because the underlying data was human-based and has those human biases to that. So bouncing off of that, I think I'll go back to Joe, and I want you to start this, and then we'll throw it to the crowd. What's our role as humans? Like, let's narrow it back down to the industry side of things for us. So the accessibility and inclusion industry, let's say between now and the next 5 years, what's our evolving role as humans in this change of technology, and where's our role now? Where's our position potentially in this future that we're on the path towards? What do you think, Joe, is our role? And I should clarify, because I had someone ask me afterwards going, is our role only going to be the QA stage? Like, so curious, Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the QA will be done by AI too. So, I think our role really should be as passionate advocates. I've run into so many people who, somebody fixed my AC, and his daughter has some severe disabilities, and he's not like connected up with tech. And so I want to go in that home and solve all the major problems that are there. And when there's a robotics and intelligence that can do that, I think that will be a lot easier to do. And I'd like to see that happen in every single home, where any problem that people want solved gets solved. And we're sitting here with the expertise on it. When ChatGPT first got popular, I went out and did a whole bunch of talks on the fact that it's all about edge cases for the AI researchers, right? Yes, you can get that standard, but if you want to get really good, you have to get the edge cases, and you're trying to emulate a human being. Nobody has more experience than we do in understanding all the diversity of human abilities, right? So we have a massive role to play here in order to say, well, what are the problems out there? Let's solve them.
Ben, I'll throw it over to you. So what do you think from what's the human role we've got moving forward? Do you think
Well, I
it's
was
a
just
little
going
bit
to
different
comment. I was fascinated to hear Joe say that he thinks even the quality assurance part will be done by AI too. And I don't doubt it'll probably get to the point where it's doing a very good job of determining whether something is technically accessible. But it's that whole compliant versus usability. Like you said, bringing the human understanding to different scenarios, bringing the lived experience in to test these products. That's where I see, I just can't foresee us disappearing from that scenario. So, really, really simple example I just came across last week from the screen reader perspective. So, someone using a table with no functional vision. We know that in HTML, if you mark up a table well, you can have multiple row and column headers. You can span, merge cells, and it can all work quite effectively. Now, if you were to ask me, that table were configured well inside guide dogs, and we had experienced screen reader users who use that same table on a regular basis, that's absolutely fine, okay? But I would never have that go out to the public, because training screen reader users for many, many years, I know that will generally confuse most, especially if they're just seeing this website. They don't use this table very often. They might even use it as a one-off. Okay, you're far better off in that case to split the table into separate, rethink it, redesign it. Okay, multiple row headers and columns. It can be extremely confusing if you're not used to that table structure. So I just can't foresee an AI determining the differences there, or so much nuance. But I could well be wrong, Joe.
Well, I should clarify, right? When I'm thinking of QA, I'm talking about the typical QA tester that has a whole variety of tests that they have to run, and they have their scripts, and they have their task list, right? They may not have a speciality in accessibility, for example. That I think the machines will do very well. I think once you add assistive technology to computer use, once that does well, it will be able to do a lot of the testing. But in terms of testing with people with disabilities, obviously, that's the end user testing, and that you can't really replace that. But it's again coming more to the edge where it's like, okay, the massive scale level of testing that's happening, that's going to be done by an AI, and I don't think it's even going to be the hardest problem. It's probably going to be one of the easier ones compared to actually building stuff correctly. Like I stopped coding 15 years ago, around when testing harnesses started to get done, test-driven development, and then the little bit that I played in those 15 years, I didn't even touch it. But now with vibe coding, I have 100 tests because I'm not writing them, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, and Tash, real briefly, I guess, before we throw it to the crowd, but I think it sounds like there's still that opportunity around the concept of the nothing about us without us from the disability community is still going to be very important, that we need to drive forward in this sort of changing technological environment. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've both touched on it. It's what the human actually needs and interacts with. So it's all well and good to have a table that's accessible to an experienced screen reader user. But then all of a sudden, if you put that in front of your 60-year-old example that you mentioned, who's recently lost their vision, they're not going to be able to navigate that. And so I think it's in the testing phase, testing with real people, but it's also right up front, making the ethical decisions around what are we actually going to ask people to share from their data so that we can make things accessible, but also what are we going to do in order to tailor things and tailor them in the right way.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Now, we do want to open up to yourselves in the room. Obviously, we've gone over a broad range of topics here, but curious, is there anything we haven't maybe covered that anybody is actually wanting to ask our amazing panel here? And so if anyone can put a hand up, we will have someone running around. There's someone down the front there I can see.
Hi, panel. Thank you for taking us through that. That was really good. My name's Jacinta. I'm from Entropia. I guess related to the point that you kind of brought up at the end there around the human involvement and the end user testing. I'm a researcher, so that's what I'm most interested in. Do we anticipate that with more of those kinds of, I guess, the busy work, the coding and everything that kind of might take a bit of time, that there'll be more time and more opportunity dedicated to improving the usability of products and improving those experiences? Or, yeah, I guess, what is your vision for what that might look like in the future?
Who wants to jump in on that one?
I was just going to say, I'm smiling when you asked that question, Jacinta, because that's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
I think we're probably going to fail faster and fail more often, and I think we're going to get a lot of things wrong. There's probably going to be a lot more complaints that start to appear. Like, I forget what the number of complaints was that's gone up with the disability discrimination recently, but there's been a lot more because of digital not being accessible, and I think that's only going to continue to increase. So I think there's probably going to be a lot of rectification that has to happen, and we'll do that through user testing, and I think it's probably just going to be a journey. So we might be coding really fast, failing really fast, but hopefully starting to get a bit more time to build in with our users as we learn along that journey.
I think we'll have to, won't we?
We'll have
to be responsible. Yeah.
Joe, you think the same?
Yeah, I would agree.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions do we have in the crowd? Here, we got one right in the middle there.
Thanks, Joel. Hi, Joe. Yeah, probably to Tash and so everyone. When we talk about AI, we know it's garbage in, garbage out. And also we know that use of AI is positive. At the same time, we are going to save a lot of time. One advice or one wisdom that I would like to seek from you is, what are we as humans going to put as a positive effect with all the time that we are getting saved out of using that automated AI tools?
Oh, that's a big one. Who wants to jump in on that one?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it just depends what it all looks like at the end. If AI is going to take all of our jobs, which is horrifying, we've talked about this privately, that entrepreneurs are going to do very well. And I think that it will be important to try and encourage more entrepreneurship for those that are suited to it. But I know a lot of people have no interest in it whatsoever, and I think that's a big concern. And if I were working like for one of the foundation model companies or for a venture capitalist, the first thing I would start with is, how do we create AI models and tools that bring jobs to people? That's probably going to be the number one concern. So that's where I would direct it personally.
Ben, Tash, any further insights on that? Doesn't need to be any.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
That was a tough one.
I think for me, every time I learn something new or every time I do research with the community, I always think, how can I give back? And so, you touched on when ChatGPT first came out, you were like, I'm going to go out and teach the community about this. And I think that's something we can all do with a little bit more time, is take the person next to you who may not have as much experience in that particular area and take them through what you've just done. The day that my parents realized that it's actually called ChatGPT and not ChatGPTP, I'll know that I've won something. But they've started to use Google. They're very excited. They've got internet in their area now. And they've realized that they're using AI because it comes back with, an automated search result. So I'm slowly getting there, training them along the way. So that's really the number one thing I would do, is just think about how you can use that time to give back and educate others.
Cool.
And to Tasha's point earlier, we've got quite a big challenge in front of us for those people who can't get smartphones in their hands or computers or some of this technology to begin with. So I can't help but think that there'll always be a need. I hope there'll be a need for people to be humans and be there to support those people that can't access the technology. They have a barrier there.
Thank you. So we've still got 1 or 2 minutes. Any other questions from the crowd? I see another one right in the middle of there, Josh.
I can ask a bit of a hypothetical one, just for a bit of a brain tease. No. If AI hadn't boomed the way that it did, and ChatGPT and LLMs weren't a hot topic mentioned every 20 minutes, what do you think the state of accessibility would be in the present? And then subsequently, do you think would be any further or any progress in the few years from now, assuming AI hadn't completely boomed?
Not a bad question. So let's take AI out of the equation. Let's assume it didn't occur. How would we be progressing accessibility today without this disruption of technology? Thoughts about that?
So I think the rate of disability has, and continues to increase. But also our definition of disability, our definition of vulnerability is increasing. And so I think through default, whether it was ChatGPT or AI, whatever innovation it was, there had to be some change that was going to happen. And it sort of takes me back to, the app revolution where, I work in consulting. All our clients came to us like, can you build us an app? And I would say, why? What's it going to do? And I feel like it's the same thing at the moment, right? It's like, hey, can you put an AI on that? Why? What's the AI going to do? And then, back to the .com boom. So I feel like there's always some kind of technology that drives a change. This is probably the biggest change that we're seeing. But I think we were at the cusp of change, regardless if AI was going to hit it or not. We had to be as an accessibility and inclusion community.
Ben?
Well, I don't know if this is a good one or not, but I'm pretty good at thinking out loud. It's probably not the place for it, but I'll do it. AI or not, it blows my mind that accessibility isn't a core component of tertiary education when you're talking computer science degrees, design degrees, etc. So that's one massive change. I don't know how we get there, but implementing accessibility, usability, inclusive design into tertiary education, university degrees, TAFE courses and that sort of thing. So we keep the foundational stuff there.
Joe, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily where we would be, but I know what I would be doing because I was going down a rabbit hole before the AI stuff and checking out HTMX, which is a back to the future idea where React and all these single-page applications it's just merchants of complexity. And they've made things so difficult because probably what happened is the W3C that defines the standards, the only one that could afford to deal with all of that, all of their bureaucracy are the large corporations. So they'll put somebody in there because they can afford to do it, and they'll all do their bidding. And at a corporation, you can afford to have a set of designers and research and all of these things. But if you are a small business, you don't have room for any of that. And the way the web was designed was for everybody, for every individual, for the small business, for the large business. And we've totally lost the plot by making it so complicated to build a website or to build an application. And HTMX is just this interesting framework that's trying to bring that back. And I was trying to get them interested in accessibility unsuccessfully, but I would have tried a little bit harder if it wasn't for AI. So that's where I would have been.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it reminds me of a story I heard from Andrew Arch, who is in the room somewhere. And about 30 years ago, he set up the digital accessibility practice for Vision Australia. And part of that, he had a manager say to him, well, what are you going to do in 5 years' time when everything's been made accessible? What's your career looking like then? And 30 years later, we're still fighting this. And in part, I believe it's because designers, developers constantly want to do something different. So there's a new framework that comes out every several years. Everyone jumps into that. And of course, we've just made the previous framework roughly accessible over 5 years. And now they changed to a new framework, and that's completely inaccessible because they're rushing it and all the rest. But I think today's looking very interesting with the advent of AI and what that might mean. But I say this story because I know there's fear in the room. Every time we've seen something happen from a technological revolution, that fear is always there, and there will be change and there will be disruption, but that usually creates new opportunities for us. And I think that's one of our challenges at the moment, is identifying what those new opportunities are. We've always complained about the fact we've never had enough time, never had enough people, never had enough support systems to really make a dent in this challenge we have ahead of us. Does AI allow us to make that dent, but we now got to work out how do we work around that, or is it going to create more work for us? Or, as I'm going to end off with, have we just created Skynet and we just all should just accept our AI overlords and the world, life is meaningless, and in 5 years' time, we will just all be scrambling for food scraps somewhere because the robots have taken over. We got one last question, I think. No, wait, we can't take the question. We have to stick to time, but our three wonderful panelists are all here. They will be there in the afternoon break. Feel free to ask them the question at the afternoon break. But I want to thank our three wonderful panelists for reading the tea leaves, giving us their views. I think they're all wrong. Skynet's going to take over. But that aside, thank you very much for that.
AliCamp, celebrating 10 years.